Thank you for your time and sharing some of your experience with us. You're certainly very busy down in Canterbury with your business Be Smart Breeding, specialising in varroa sensitive hygiene, and also an AP2 inspector with the AFB Management Agency. I was fortunate to hear you talk at this year's apiculture conference in Christchurch. It's great to see such passion about a subject that affects every single beekeeper in New Zealand, namely varroa. So to start, what is your area of particular interest in apiculture?
Particularly, it would be the bee health, I would say. I've got, I know we all produce honey, we all do honey production and everything, but I used to say beekeeping was the art of beekeeping, but now I feel like beekeeping is more of a science. And varroa, and it was unfortunate that varroa came along, but I think it awoken us up a little bit to appreciate, the bees and actually how they operate and more the health of the bees. Hence why I'm interested in trying to come up, help with some sort of solution and maintaining the varroa in the hives and everything, and also the bee health, being involved with trees for bees and the nutrition side of things.
Mm-hmm. So what are VSH or varroa sensitive hygienic bees, and how will they help us?
Well, varroa sensitive hygiene is a behaviour that the bees express, and as the name would identify, it's the side of certain bees have a hygienic sensitive side. So what the bees, they didn't explain it very well, but what certain bees do, a lot of bees are hygienic. So all VSH bees are hygienic, but not all hygienic bees are VSH. So these particular bees, they will actually sense the varroa in the brood, and they'll uncap it and pull out the brood, or uncap it and the mites may escape, or they may eat the mite or bite the mite or something, and they interrupt the life cycle basically of the varroa mite. So there hasn't been, well, I've been doing this for 14 years or so, and when I first began, no one was really too sure what was going on. They knew that certain bees could detect the mites, but they didn't really know whether it was because it was the stress, the larva giving off some stress, or whether it was the bees sensing the varroa. And it's only just last year, Fanny Monet in France, she has confirmed that it's actually the varroa mimic the pheromones of the larvae, but the very, very young siblings of the varroa, the very young baby varroa, are too young to do that, and they actually give off 13 compounds, which they call VPSs, and that's what they believe the bees are actually now detecting. So there's actually, and going back to your first question, that's what I'm finding amazing about beekeeping, because VSH in itself is just, even though people have been doing it for 30 years, it's all still very new. Like we were just talking about Sammy Ramsey, and he only a couple of years ago identified the fact that actually the varroa weren't living off the hemolymph of the bees, they're actually living off the fatty tissue. And these little things are quite important to understand, what are actually the bees doing. A lot of bees, my first testing when I'm doing VSH is I'm first of all looking for resistance, because there's more than, VSH is a form of resistance. There's also grooming behaviour and shortened life cycle that the bees have. So that means when the mites hatch, they're too immature to, they wouldn't have mated, so they don't actually populate more. So yeah. Does that help answer your question?
Yes, thank you.
Yeah.
So do you think that we will breed VSH bees in New Zealand, or have mite resistant bees, considering we can't import any genetics into New Zealand?
Yeah, well, Plant and Food when was it, 14 or so years ago, when they had their funding, they proved that there was VSH within the bee population in New Zealand. So when I started doing it here in Ashburton, I started with just looking at the Canterbury beekeepers' progeny, and yes, I have found VSH. For me, it's been it's very labour intense and it's very time consuming. So not only do I have to earn an income, it's a lot of time doing it. So, and then doing instrumental insemination. So yes, short answer to your question, I think yes, but it's not as simple as you think. So what I'm doing at the moment is I'm wanting to do a pilot study to say, okay, if I found some VSH, say 70% VSH in a commercial beekeeper's outfit, and we bred from that bee, what sort of VSH levels go out to the F1s, the daughters. It is more I think it's possible, but it'd be really good that if we could. My next aim is to actually start up a New Zealand queen breeding association and discuss it further, because it's you've got to actually breed. If we're going to breed for it, it's to amplify it, we need proper breeding programs. So, and I think too, also, I believe that bees would eventually evolve with the VSH trait, but then it's like that's natural selection. So what other traits are you losing in the interim to actually gain that? And maybe, so therefore just breeding for it is speeding up evolution and hopefully maintaining those, the particular traits that we require or we prefer, because realistically bees have been totally domesticated by man over all these years. So that's the true bee population isn't really around anymore, possibly.
So you've partly answered my next question. Do you think we'll be able to keep the genetic variation so that bees won't be susceptible to the next new deadly disease?
Yes, I think so. Because that's a very important question, because that's why I'm calling for a new New Zealand Queen Breeding Association. So because future bees, I think they will have a very important part to play, with doing a whole lot of genetic analysing different traits and things. So therefore, with varroa, Plant and Food have come up, they've found the snippets for the hygiene side of the VSH. There's a whole lot of science going on, but I think it's really important that we have good wholesome breeding programs, so then we don't lose these traits. And then if there are other parasites or pathogens coming into New Zealand, we can also use the knowledge that we've gained from just doing, trying to offset varroa towards those. So that's what I find really exciting about beekeeping. That's why I loved your first question. I'm like, well, it's it's a science now. We need to embrace it.
Yep. So what do you think will be the next major pest or disease that will hit us?
Well, I used to think it was small hive beetle, and when I used to hear about it, I used to think, oh, how annoying having that. That would annoy me, because it's so messy and it sounds disgusting. But after listening to Sammy Ramsey talking about, what was it? We called it the tropomite, but what was that?
The tropolapsis. Mite?
Yeah, Tropolapsis mite. Yeah, the tropi mite. After listening to him, I was actually thinking, it resonated with me, thinking, well, heck, that's exactly what happened with the varroa mite. You know, it actually traversed around the world quicker than we sort of really anticipated. And I think if it lives like the varroa, it's going to sap the energy out of the bee larvae and the bees quicker. Yeah, I think that would be really devastating. It'd be just a horrible thing to have to actually deal with. So I really sort of support all the work he's doing and everything. I think it's important. So I presume your listeners would know what that little mite does. I think more the research is just, Sammy's just trying to work out what it actually does do, doesn't it? Because when he showed us videos, which I thought were amazing, Harry had you could see through the cell and you could see the varroa mite as well as the tropi mite. And what did he say? That the varroa actually just suck on the fatty tissue just sort of in one point, but this little mite went all over the place, and they knew it was sucking the life out of the larvae, but to what extent was yet unknown, and what extra viruses and pathogens it was carrying was also unknown. So yeah, I think that's one to look out for. And with my Appy2 work, I actually help with looking for exotics too, which I think is really important.
So as hobbyists, can we buy VSH queens?
Yes, you can. Yep, I supply anyone and everyone. So yeah, anyone could just contact me. But I really have to emphasize to everybody that you still have to treat and you still have to monitor. It's not the golden bullet, unfortunately in New Zealand, as you mentioned before, we can't bring in any germplasm or bees into New Zealand. So therefore, my breeding program, or any breeding program, we can't start like they did it overseas in Europe and in USDA and Baton Rouge. They started with, true VSH bees. I think they were Russian bees. Oh, don't quote me on that, but they were, some species of bees that were actually definitely resistant, so they could start breeding programs from there. So yes, they're still susceptible to getting varroa, but what I'm finding, and another study I'd like to study as well, is they seem to bounce back better when, like I can get mine up to very high mite levels and then treat them still with organics and they bounce back. You generally expect them to collapse. So it's not, they're not the be and end all, but I do believe, with the way they cope with varroa, it'll be hopefully less pathogens.
I see that you're an ambassador for Trees for Bees. What is this organisation and where can we access their resources?
Trees for Bees is a really good initiative that was started many a moon ago by Linda Newstrom-Lloyd, and I think John Hartnell from Federated Farmers and Assure Quality, Tony Roper and Marco were good backers for Linda. And what they've done, what Linda did there, she's a botanist, and Linda spent about a decade looking at what plants were yielding nectar and pollen at certain times of the year. So what I did, I helped to survey the beekeepers, got them to identify what flowers they believed in trees, they believed in their region and in their certain areas were bringing in pollen and nectar. And then she diligently went out with students and collected the bees, with the pollen on, and identified the nectars. And so she's done regional calendars, planting calendars. So she's worked out at what time, basically, in different regions, all the trees flowered, and then she identified what were the highest protein in the pollens, and so what was best to plant for protein, and also identified what the nectars. She did. I know that the pollen analyzing was a little bit simpler, but actually she used I think it was Karen at GNS to do the honey, and that was a lot more complicated. So now she's got a website. It's www.treesforbeesnewzealand.org, and there's some really good tools on there. I encourage everybody to look at that website. You can go in and you can look at regionally what plants, tree, you can work out whether it's a tree, a shrub, or a flat, little plant, and what to plant all year round, so your bees can collect all year round, basically. Because also it's a lot to do, like if people, there's certain crops, if you want a monocrop, say for example Manuka, the initiative now actually does a lot of planting programs for farmers and beekeepers on the land, and say the farmer wanted a certain crop pollinated, so you can plant for the build up of that crop, and then you can plant after that crop, so there's no distractions to the bees. They'll pollinate certain crops, and the same for Manuka. Like Manuka would normally, for the build up to the Manuka season in the bush areas, there's not much for the bees to forage on, especially for pollens. So you can plant for the build up of the Manuka season, and then of course once the Manuka stops, there's not much after that, so then you can plant after. So it's a fantastic initiative, and Linda's pretty much dedicated a lot of her life to doing it. So yeah, my hat. I like working in with them, so I work. I'm always helping her at the conferences and everything. And as I mentioned, when she first started up, I was in Nelson, and actually started I did a bee expo sponsored by Mitre 10 at the Nelson A&P show, and that's how we first met, because I wanted a theme, and I found out about Trees for Bees, and we did a little Trees for Bees expo, and it was worked out really well. And then a lot of people there contacted me, and they said, I want to get into beekeeping. So the next thing I know, I'd reinstated the bee club there, and I think that's about 300 members now. So it's amazing what evolves. How many members are in your club?
Just under 500.
Oh, well done. Yeah, that's a good amount. Yeah,
keeps us busy.
Yes, definitely. Yeah.
At the Trees for Bees stand at the conference, I particularly enjoyed the pollen analysis with Dr. Shun Lee. Is that something that any keen hobbyists can do themselves?
Oh, most definitely, and that's they're really encouraging. So yeah, Dr. Shun Lee and Ian Rain wrote the book. They work at GNS, and they put all the time in. They did all the pollen analysis for Linda's work. So then they identified there was a gap, and having a manual to do some pollen analysis. So you can go on to the website, www.treesforbeesnewzealand.org, and you can download a PDF file if you don't get the book, or I think you can even order the book. It's a nice hard-covered book with glossy pages, so if you're in the lab and got a microscope, you spill things, it's really good. So it's a very good tool to have. If I had more time, I would definitely get into that side of things as well. I find it really interesting. And I just, it's just magical looking at some of those pollens under the microscope.
I've got the book when I was at conference, so hopefully this season I'll be analysing my honey to see what's in there.
Oh yeah. It's good, yeah. Because I think there's only 12 monofloral honeys in New Zealand, I think. Yeah, which is interesting.
The mite monitoring measure and manage project looks very interesting. Is that something we can get involved with up here?
Oh, I would love you guys too. Yeah, what's the mantra? Monitor, monitor, monitor. Yeah, I can't go on about that enough. Because of my work with the VSH, I think I say it all the time, I'm the only one in New Zealand that gets excited finding varroa, because of course I have to have varroa to test the hives for the VSH trait, because it's an additive trait, it only comes out into the bees if varroa is around. So what I have to do is, so therefore I monitor all the time. So not only to identify the hives that actually keep 0 levels of mites, but also have to monitor them and get ones with high levels of mites, so then I can infect the hives that I want to test. So in my years of monitoring, I'm finding that monitoring tells me a story. So that story generally is, if I've got the biggest wake up call is like if I get high levels and I ring up the beekeepers around me, because I tell them that, I've got high levels. I am treating, because I don't want to, mite bomb, and lose the hives. Number one, lose the hives or mite bomb my neighbours. So I have to be very diligent about that. But then a lot of the time I'll be finding, like really low. One particular site one day, I had potential breeders at it, and the levels were 0 and 2 in a couple of the hives. And I went to put in some test frames that had been impregnated with varroa, and I thought, I'll do one more mite count, and it was only a couple of weeks after the last one, but I thought I'd do another one, and they'd gone up. The one in 0 had gone up to 26 mites per 300, and the one with 2 had gone up into the 50s. So if you know the MPG or the mite population growth, that's impossible. Like it doubles all the time, but that's pretty impossible to get to those levels. And I've been doing enough years that I've never seen it. So straight away I knew that my bees were being mite bombed. They'd somehow got infected by possibly collapsing hives around. And then sure enough, I was asked to go and do a certificate of inspection for a hobbyist a couple of weeks later. And I got to his hives and he said, it was only about a couple of blocks away from my site. And he goes, he thought his hives were really, really active, but they're actually being robbed. And then he goes, oh yeah, they were marching out with no wings on. And I'm like, oh no. So yeah, so straight away, it was sad to see, but I'm glad I did see it, because it just was a big tick to me it just reiterated to me, well, yeah, that's where my problem came from. And that's why mite monitoring is really, really important, because if I hadn't monitored, I wouldn't have known. And so therefore, with the mite monitoring, I want, when we mite monitor, we're designing, we're actually going for the funding now to have an app on your phone. So then when you monitor, you can put your levels on the phone. So that keeps a historical record of that site for you. And it also, you can, so you got your own records, but you can also, if other people around you are doing it, you can anonymously see what sort of levels are around you. So then if you're low and they're high, to be a little bit wary, because maybe you're going to get reinfected. Or if you're high and they're low, there's a management problem. Have you left the treatments on the dashboard of the car, or have you been using organics and you should do another one, or anything But then if you're all high, well then it's an area problem. And then if we also put into it what treatments we're using, then if there are any resistant problems coming around, then we have some data to take to so the suppliers or the manufacturers and say, look, maybe we should look into this, because I think the inevitability is we will get resistance, further down the track, but you need evidence and data. No one likes being, rah rah rah, though, something's wrong with your product when it's just yes, your gut instinct might be right, but actually realistically you have to have some data to back that up. So my mite monitoring, yes, that would be great. I do, when people buy my queens, I send out a little sheet just to encourage them to monitor, even if it's in the spring and the autumn, before and after treatments. With commercial guys, totally understand you can't monitor all your hives. I monitor all mine because I'm specifically looking for breeders all the time, but we've come up with from overseas studies, and for the data we've collected already, 8 hives in an apiary is sufficient enough. Whether you've got 8 hives or 50 hives on the site is sufficient enough to look to see whether you've got any with a high level, because if you have any with a high level, the inevitability is eventually they'll have horizontal transfer to the other hives, because rule of thumb, if you're going to place your hives and you don't want to get horizontal transfer, you actually have to have each hive 10 meters away from each other, which is totally impractical.
So finally, which bee book are you currently reading, and which is your all-time favorite bee book?
Oh, yeah, I love that question, because I've got The History of Bees by Marja Lundy, I think it is. Actually, is a really good go-to. I love it. For a story, it's really, really good. So whenever I have friends staying, or beekeepers come and go and stay, I always get them to read that, and it's a great book. But the best book I came across when I was working in California was called Bee Sex Essentials, and that was by Lawrence John Connor, and that was really, really good, because I've actually done a couple of PowerPoints on what I picked up on there. He even starts talking about the history of microscopes, and it's a really, really good read, and it's quite well done. But when you ask me what I was reading at the moment, I read Sick Bee, Healthy Bees by Phil Lester, and I really want to read it again, but I've given it away to a friend. So and so I want that back just so I can read it again, because I will read so many research papers that sometimes when I'm reading bee books, it's I sometimes look for a good book. I'm reading Kowai now at the moment, but there's nothing to do with bees. But the other book I'm going to order is Interviews with a Beekeeper by Steve Donahoe, and he travelled around the world and interviewed interesting beekeepers. So I wouldn't mind having a wee read of that. But like I said, I read so many research papers. Which I never read. I have to read things twice or 3 times just to retain it or comprehend it, basically. I'm just a layman, and that's why I'd like to think when I retire, I wouldn't mind writing a few things too, because just to make sense of everything I've read, for the general Joe blogs to comprehend.
I'm looking forward to reading that book.
What have you got a favourite book?
Well, I Thomas Seeley. I love all Thomas Seeley's book, and the book on by Jürgen Torntz, the book on the superorganism. Was it The Buzz About Bees? I think it's called.
Oh yes, actually, I think I'll just write that, Buzz About Bees. Yeah,
that's really good, that one. And Phil Lester, his book on wasps, and his got a new book out which I want to read, is Pests and Predators. That's just
Oh,
come
I
out a
thought that
couple of
was
months
Sick
ago.
Bees, Healthy Bees. Isn't that Sick Bees, Healthy Bees?
That was his middle book. He's got another one just come out.
Oh, good
So yeah,
God. Oh, he's
I've
busy,
been,
lad.
I put that on my Christmas list, I think.
Yes. Did you hear that? But I think, yeah, it'd be, yeah, you could even do a podcast on all the books. You know, there's so many, because even when now I go to, you know, it's always at the airport, I see a book, a new published book on bees. And yeah, it's stories, you know, a storybook that has bees integrated into it. Yeah, I think that's really lovely.
Yeah, my collection of bee books is growing
Yes.
exponentially.
Yeah.
Thank you again for your time, and hopefully we'll see you at one of our field days when you're up here in Auckland.
Oh, yeah, that would be lovely.
Cool. Okay,
right.
Well, thanks very much, Rae.
Hey, look, I really appreciated you guys contacting me, and yeah, good luck with the season, everybody.
Cheers. Thank you.
Yep. Cheers.